Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate. This is the Championship podcast. Plenty to discuss this week with my co-host, Oli Mann. Great to be back on the pod with you, Oli. Thanks for joining us as ever. How are you keeping, bud?
Yes, not bad, thank you. It's nice to be back on the show. Obviously, it's been 2 or 3 weeks. I've started my new job in the time in between, so that's been keeping me busy, but overall doing pretty well, thanks, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, really well, thanks. I suppose first place would be to talk about the managerial change at Birmingham City. I mean, bit seems very harsh on John Eustace, doesn't it? After the job that he's done so far with Blue sixth in the table.
Yeah, it seems unbelievably harsh. And this is fun because it's not often people come on and we get to talk about your team, Gab. I get to ask you a few questions, try and pull out your thoughts on what you think about what's happening at the club at the moment. But yeah, it seems an unbelievably harsh decision from the outside looking in. I know, obviously, last season, Birmingham were a lot of people's tips for relegation. There was a load of chaos off the pitch and he guided them to safety with relative comfort. I think there were sort of 3-4 games left at the end of the season. Yeah. It wasn't like they were being really pushed in. 6th in the league now. Seems to have done a fantastic job. So it does seem really, really harsh. But of course, it seems as though the club want to go in a different direction. I've got the statement in front of me because I think it's important to look at these key words that starts this statement. It is essential that the board of directors and the football management are fully aligned on the importance of implementing a winning mentality and a culture of ambition across the entire football club. So, Gab, what does that mean to you as a Birmingham fan? And where do you stand on, obviously, the decision to part with John Eustace?
I'm not a huge fan of the statement. I have to be honest. It feels pretty obvious to me. I don't know how it seems to you, Oli, as an outsider, that the change of manager is done almost entirely from a commercial perspective. I would consider it inevitable that in a few weeks' time they'll be announcing a Netflix documentary where Rooney and Tom Brady are starring, and there's gonna and they feel like there's more traction to be gained from that by having Wayne Rooney as manager rather than John Eustace. And I get the financial and marketing aspect of it. We're all adults and everything, but I also feel like football has to be about treating people well. And I'm not happy with how John Eustace has been treated because he's done fantastic work. It's not just that we're 6th in the table, by the way. If we were 12th in the table and playing the way we have been so far this season, I would have been really happy with him. So, I feel quite disappointed. I can understand the reasoning, but I think the statement seemed a little bit disrespectful and not really on board with it, to be honest.
No, and I thought that myself, but I think it's an interesting point you made there. Obviously, you talked a little bit about how he's had the Blues team playing so far this season. Obviously, I know I don't want to dwell too much on the statement, and we'll go on to sort of what you see as the rest of the season holding for Birmingham. But I'm interested in this idea of the no fear playing style and what that looks like, really. Do you think that's what Wayne Rooney's Derby did, for example, when he was there? Is that what you would associate his football with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably associate his Derby side with getting the ball early, and they played some good counter-attacking football. They actually put 4 past Blues when we had Aita Karanka as manager, and I think he did do some good work developing some young players. So I think if John Eustace was either doing a bad job or if he'd left of his own volition, I could have got excited about Rooney. And even now there is a part of me that's excited by the idea of Wayne Rooney being Birmingham City manager. But I think that it's difficult for me to almost get my head round to the next thing because I'm still a little bit on the feeling a bit of sympathy for John Eustace. So I'm still a little bit at that stage, really.
Still a bit raw. And that's the thing for me, I think, when you have these scenarios. Obviously, it is difficult to start to see. But under Eustace, obviously, it had been a fantastic start. What do you still see as being that sort of realistic level of achievement for Birmingham this season? What I'm a little bit worried about is you spoke there, obviously, that Rooney, let's take the scenario out of it, like you've said. Obviously, there's disappointment there. But it is something that maybe could have been exciting in different circumstances.
Sure.
But do you think Rooney coming in after a manager's got you to 6th, a popular manager at the club, as I understand it, somebody who understands Birmingham very well. Do you think Rooney runs a little bit of a risk here that if you do drop down, say you are 12th or in the bottom half in a few months' time, do you think the fans will accept that? Do you think there's a change in of expectation now?
Yeah, possibly. I think that he's the first 5 fixtures actually are really difficult. So that's probably doesn't help him. And when we've made a similar change in the past, dismissing Gary Rowett, who's hugely popular, for Gianfranco Zola in 2016, we ended up going on a massive bad run, and then so we were, I think, 7th at the time we made the change, and then we ended up dropping just outside the relegation zone. And then before the derby at Villa Park, we actually changed it and then got Harry Redknapp in, and then we ended up winning 2 of our last 3 to stay up under Redknapp. What are you shaking your head at there?
That is the way that just seems to me of history repeating itself is bizarre, in that obviously you've got a manager doing well who was popular, and then the change comes for commercial reasons. I think it felt similar then that you were bringing in a big name in Gianfranco Zola. And like the fact that we're here, obviously Birmingham have been through so many ownership issues. They finally got an owner that feels positive and is looking up. But this just feels like repeating that mistake, doesn't it?
It does a bit. I don't think we'll completely capitulate in the way we did, because I think that actually the performances have actually probably been more sustainable than they were. So actually under Rowett, in his final season, I felt like we were kind of winning games narrowly, but it was you felt like we were getting away with it a bit, or you kind of felt like I think if Rowett had stayed, that season we'd have ended up regressing into sort of mid-table, maybe top half kind of thing. Wouldn't have got into the playoffs, I don't think. So yeah, I think this season, I think because the performances have been so encouraging, I don't see us getting dragged into a relegation dogfight, but you do feel like there's that danger of us losing our mojo a little bit because there's this massive change, and I actually think that was the last thing the players needed. So part of me is excited. Hope Wayne Rooney does really well. Best of luck to him. Great opportunity for him, but there's also part of me that feels like we've not done the right thing. So I'm going to bring in our first guest of the evening, and it's Jonny Bullock, who's got a massive smile on his face, probably one that wouldn't have been prevalent 6 weeks ago. Jonny, great to have you on the show. How are you keeping, bud?
I'm great, guys. Yeah, I'm only smiling because I'm on with you two. That's all it is. Don't worry. I've forgotten about the game. What are you on about? What football? What's this football we talk about? But yeah, I'm doing very well, guys. I'm doing very well.
Good. I'm glad to see. I think I would like to just come in here to cover off a little bit of why you've got a smile on your face, because obviously Middlesbrough are in a fantastic run of form, but I'm going to let people into the inner workings just a little bit of why Jonny might be feeling particularly smug about being on here with me today. It was half-time against Sheffield Wednesday, and I took my opportunity. I thought, right, they've been rubbish this season, bottom of the league. They're even losing at Hillsborough. I'm going to take my moment and I'm going to mock Jonny. And for those who aren't aware, me and Jonny did a YouTube video together for League of 72 last year. It was about the automatic promotion race. And he said Boro would finish above United because they've got Michael Carrick. And I texted him to say, Jonny, I don't want to be that guy. But at what point can I start clipping up that? Showing it to everybody, getting it shared across socials, just having a little bit of fun at Jonny's expense. Since that point, by my count, you've won 5 games in a row, including the EFL Cup. You've scored 15, conceded 3, and United lost 8-0. So all things considered, I think you've been having a bit of a good time with it, Jonny.
Yeah, to be honest, it's been great. Yeah, thanks for sending that text in, because I feel like it just lifted the curse of what we had. And then we've been on a bit of a flyer ever since, haven't we? So, I mean, I loved the League of 72 video. It was great, wasn't it? I mean, we had a great time. But yeah, obviously the start of our season was horrendous, and I was just waiting for your message to come through at one point. And then I was saying it, I was like, oh, he's done me there. But there's always going to be a time where I can get it back and We're slowly doing that now. We're slowly doing it. It's just crazy that we've won more games than what Sheffield United win all season. So it's just nuts, isn't it? But we'll get there. We'll get there. I've done it live on the StreamYard as well. I've done it live. But sorry about that, Oli. Sorry.
No, it's
but
fine.
anyway,
I deserved it. I brought it on myself, I have to say. But to me, I think it's interesting seeing how this season has echoed last season for Boro.
Yeah.
What do you see it as being a similar run where it's just a case of it's turned a little bit and performances are really now kicking upwards? Or is it a bit of an evolution that's slightly different to what you were bringing last season?
Oh, it's definitely an evolution. I think it has to be because of the amount of players we lost and the players we've gained. Obviously, you'll know now from seeing Archer that he has a lot of quality about him. Appreciate might not get as much like goals this year, but last year you kind of see what he really brings. And you know, we have changed. You know, there has been players that have been brought in. They're slowly starting to click, and we're just evolving ever so slightly. We have reverted a little bit to a 3 at the back, like 3-2-5 again, or pretty much like a 3-2-5, or a 2-3-5 is kind of like the evolvement that we had this year. Where both wing backs are going forward now, which is exciting. Which also leaves us a bit like, you know, bit of space and behind, but it's just starting to click, and I'm really happy that it has, because you know Carrick was getting a bit of grief and he did a lot of good work last year, and you know how fickle like football fans can be, can't you? So, but I think we have evolved and we have turned a corner. But now I've said that, we'll probably lose the next 3 games and it'll be all pressure on again. So, but we'll see. But yeah, I definitely think we've evolved.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. What do you think's been key to the recent form? Because I think what really excites me is Latte Lath, Johnny. I know he only came on came off the bench in the 4-0 victory at Sunderland, but it really feels like you've got Josh Coburn running defenders into the ground for 65 minutes, and then you've got that Latte Lath to come on for that sharpness of movement. That seems like a really hard to defend against.
Yeah, Latte looks great, doesn't he? I mean, he has a fantastic name, and I hope his talent is better than that. And I think he's just slowly collectively as a team. I think we're just slowly getting to know each other's games. Lucas Engel was awful against Sheffield Wednesday, got dragged, and everyone was like, "God, he what a horrendous signing." And I rated him a 5 out of 5 as well in our Lordtown video, so I was getting absolute pelters. So it was quite nice to see him pull a great performance in against Cardiff, then really good against Sunderland. And like Laugh as well, like he just has everything about him which I like, where he has good movement, he likes to bring players in, similar to Chuba last year. All the off the ball stuff is brilliant. I think the only thing that lets him down sometimes is finishing, and it's a shame when you're a striker that your finishing is your weak point. But he's slowly getting there, and I think the team is as well. There's a lot of good players that we have. It's just bedding them in. You know, we could probably still go into the market in January and maybe bring in 1 or 2, but there's definitely excitement around the group now. I'm glad that the more our players this year rather than loanees, because you know as soon as the season ended last year, we lost 66 goals pretty much overnight. So it's nice now to kind of have these players and then also have like options to buy as well. Like Sam Greenwood, like £1.5 million loan to buy fee. Like you snap your hand off because he's been brilliant the last couple of games. So it's all positive. I think it's just positive, and we're slowly evolving, becoming that more sustainable club that we needed to be.
The thing that strikes me about Sam Greenwood, Johnny, is that his movement seems to be very selfless, and he seems to be willing to go away from the general direction of play in order to create space for other players. Reminds me actually a little bit of Aaron Ramsey, who you had in the second half of last season. Do you think he's a talent that we should really be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I was pretty shocked that Leeds let him go, to be honest. He's got a lot of talent about him, and I think you nailed it there, Gab, where he tries to move into space, and I think that touch into space and the ability to pull away from defenders and get into nice positions is really been beneficial to us, to be honest. And I was a bit worried for the Sunderland game when McGree was out injured, and I was like, God, McGree's our best player. Like, we create a lot through him. But Greenwood just came in, and he just really showed that we could probably live without McGree if we had to. And
different type of player, would you say?
Yeah. Different. I think all players are, and they all have the same characteristics, but there is some nice similarities and strengths that they have where they're able to kind of drop in and out of play, good touch, good movement, and able to create opportunities. And I think that his finish for the first goal was absolutely brilliant. And hopefully we're a team that just keeps confidence high, because you can see like where teams lose that little bit of confidence and it's not happening for you, how easy it can crumble. And we've hopefully got that good moment right now, and we can keep building on it because we can't fear anyone now because we've beat 2 teams in a week who are in the playoffs. So there's opportunity for us, I think, just to kind of climb up the table now. But yeah, Greenwood's a really good talent for sure.
Mike on, Oli.
He's done it, Mike on. Oh, he's done it.
Oh, you know what he's done? His dog's come in and
On
made
your
a
head.
noise, and he's gone, I'll make sure dog's not getting in bloody stream like an idiot. But yeah, I think for me, that mentality point's really interesting because obviously I felt as though at the start of the season, it felt as though that can really turn against you, and turning that momentum is so difficult. But the game that really stood out for me was Watford, where obviously you'd gone 2-0 up really early on. They clawed it back to 2-2, and you'd think, well, you know, it's been a difficult start. Is there going to be a regression? Are they going to go into their shells? Is this where it maybe starts to go again? To kick on and win that game was really the point that I thought, oh no, Boro have turned this around now, because to get that where you've thrown it away and then still gone on to win the game, that must have felt huge at the time. And I think maybe that sums up some of the mentality you were talking about there.
Yeah, definitely. And like, we didn't give much away in that game either, which was frustrating. It's been a similar theme for like most of the season where we don't give much away, and then we just get punished by like a screamer, an own goal, or something stupid. And it's just been like, oh my god, we'll with us like ever. And you don't want to let you out towards the bottom of the table. Like everything bad just happens to you, doesn't it? Like you have all the mistakes, all the like confidence just disappears. And yeah, when it went to 2-2, I was like, for goodness sake, typical Boro, here we go again. And then, yeah, we pulled it back and we won 3-2. And it was a big result for us that we haven't won in Watford for about 10 years. So it was just massive for us to get a win there, to be honest. I've never, ever seen us win at Vicarage Road. So I'm glad that we've finally done it for a long, long time.
Absolutely. I really want to talk about Isaiah Jones, Johnny, because I remember him having a fantastic season a couple of years ago in 21-22 when he was a bit of a breakout star. I think he'd been on loan in Scotland the year before. Not everyone was expecting huge things from him, and he had a sensational campaign. But I'm actually wondering if he's then going to end up being better this season than he was in 21-22, because I feel like he seems to have that freedom to cut inside more and plays more of an inverted threat and actually threaten goal, whereas 2 years ago it was I think he was playing right wing back a lot under Chris Wilder, and it was kind of a case of getting to the byline and then playing the cut back rather than just attacking goal, and he seems to be able to threaten even more that way.
Yeah, he's definitely improved. I think Saturday was probably his best performance in a Boro shirt that I've definitely seen live. You know, he was absolutely electric for about a good 20 minutes, and you know, he needs that, to be honest. He definitely needs that. I've not. He's very hit and miss and frustrating sometimes as Isaiah, and so I'm just thinking he does a really good thing, and then like his cross is just horrendous, and then he's got, oh, for goodness sake, right, come on, and then like he'll do something awful, and then like he'll pull out something really good, but he's just never really been able to like have that consistency in his game. This year he started to have it, and I think you're right there, Gab. Like he has a lot more freedom with his game. You don't have to rely on him as well because we've got other players trying to create problems. You've got Engel on that left-hand side or Bangura when he comes in. You know, you have McGree and Mills have different options where it kind of gives him you remove the burden from him, because I think under Chris Wilder it was very much right. Okay, well, pass to Crooks, then pass to Jones, lay it back, and if we don't score, then oh well, God help us. And this year it's a little bit different, and I think we've got the options as well though this year as well. Like we've started to build a squad which will compete for places. And that keeps him on his toes as well. So I think there's a number of things that are helping him. And then also I think his outside of football life is a lot more stable now. Last year he went through a lot of grief, and I felt obviously went through it with his performance as well. So hopefully now he's more settled off the pitch as well. Competition places, all the good things that you need for a player. And yeah, he's slowly starting to become good again.
No, that's really exciting to see. Johnny, what do you think Boro can achieve this season? You're talking about the playoffs. Last time we spoke to you, you now eyeing up the automatic spots? Or?
No, I'll take playoffs any day of the week, to be honest. It's definitely my prediction for the start of the season. It still is the same now. Well, obviously it's much better now because we're winning games, but I know there's going to be a point where we might have that difficult spot again. But yeah, I'll take playoffs any day of the week.
What do you reckon, Oli? What do you reckon Boro can achieve this season?
Yeah, I think it's playoffs as well. I think that's probably where they'll end up. I think we're seeing their level come out a lot more now. I think at the start of the season, obviously, results weren't matching performances. And it feels like they're a club that do get that momentum going really quite well. We've seen it sort of under Chris Wilder. We then saw it last year under Carrick. Maybe we're seeing that again, just starting a little bit earlier. So yeah, I'm backing them for the playoffs. I think they probably should make it, but I don't think they'll come as close to getting excited about automatics as last year, because I feel as though that's just a step too far.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Well,
I'm glad I don't have to do one of those videos again, to be honest, the final two with me and Oli, because I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for Oli to get me back. I'm waiting for it. It's going to be on Twitter at some point this season. It'll be there. But yeah, I'll take the playoff ones any day.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see, but certainly on the right track for that on recent form, Johnny. Keep up the great work on the Boro Breakdown podcast. It's been great to have you on, and hopefully catch you again later in the season.
Yeah, I'll speak to you soon, guys. Thanks very much for having me on, Oli. Always lovely to see you, mate. Always a pleasure.
You too,
catch you, guys.
See you later, mate.
Very much there. Yeah, great to have Johnny on. So our next guest is Luke from SwansCast Media. How are you, Luke?
Hi guys, and good. Thanks. How are you both?
Yeah, we're very well, Luke. And I guess you're in better spirits as a Swansea City fan than perhaps you were when we spoke a few weeks ago. I wonder why that might be.
Yeah, definitely better spirits. I think I was trying to be less aggressive with the way the feeling around the club was when I was talking to you. Even though it was negative, I was trying to be a little bit like, right, it is still early days. And I guess it's easy looking from the outside in. You can definitely say, well, I told you so. Because it is doing well. We're doing well at the moment. We've gone on a run of 4 straight wins on the back of and a draw on the back of a really poor loss against our main rivals, Cardiff. I don't know whether that maybe needed to happen to kind of get the cogs in motion, and you never want it to be against that team if it is to kickstart your season. But ultimately, I think it has led on to better things. So maybe take the defeat on the chin and have a better season, which is kind of in tune with what you were saying in his press conference, even though everyone got riled up about it. But yeah, funny.
Oli, I don't know if you can remember situations where Sheffield United have lost the Steel City derby, but then it's kind of given them a kick up the backside. Can that sometimes have that kind of impact on a team?
I can't remember it happening in mine, because generally when we've lost the Steel City derby, we've then capitulated entirely. Wednesday fans will be screaming 2012 at me. So I'd be remiss not to mention it. But you can see how it's happened. I think it obviously can make such a galvanising impact. And I think particularly what I've seen from United in the past is where we have lost big games, not necessarily that game, but games that are similar, where actually you're in a really bad run, you have a really bad result. And actually sometimes the manager can get into you, some of the players can get into each other, and it really brings the sort of club together a little bit and creates that us against the world mentality. I think once you get that, it makes a huge difference. But actually, Luke, I had a question about this, because I was speaking to, I've got friends, obviously, who are Wednesday fans, and I was speaking to them about it, and they said that despite the 3-0 win, when obviously you'd beat Wednesday, that there was still some boos around the place for Duff, and obviously things weren't landing very well since he'd come into the club. Have you noticed that be quite a big change now? Is that a completely different environment, or do you still think there's some of those grumbles in there?
So the grumbles came from predominantly, there was in the early season form, it wasn't amazing, but we could kind of see what was going on. And then for Bristol and Cardiff, who are it was a half derby and the derby match, the performance was just really bad, and you couldn't see a game plan. So one of the big issues has been lack of seeing what the game plan is for the future. Even if you're losing games, I can see what he's building. You couldn't see it in those games, and they are the biggest games, so people got really frustrated. But also what he was saying in the media, he wasn't helping himself. Now, I know the media probably was tripping him up in a way to get the clicks and the reaction, and they got the reaction, but he didn't help himself in what he was saying. So those two things combined led to really a cauldron of negativity, and it was really quite toxic actually after the Cardiff game. We got the draw at QPR, which I said at the time, for me that was a massive turning point, even though the way we didn't win the game by like a late 90-minute equaliser. Again, the place erupted with negativity, but I was like, let's calm down. I think a draw after that form and after the negativity is a good platform. And going forward, it has turned out to be. Now, after Wednesday, there was still booze. It was the first home game since the Cardiff result. And as much as we got a 3-0 win there, you know, what you're seeing in the Plymouth game, I went to the Plymouth game on the pitch. You didn't see that in Sheffield. We got a result there, maybe rather than the performance, but needed that. You got the draw, then you got your first win on the board of the season. And now it's kind of started building. And all of a sudden, 4 games later against Plymouth and against Norwich especially, there was so much on display about what we were told we would see from Duff, from what he did at Barnsley, the press, the fast transition to attack, making those opportunities. And we haven't lost necessarily a lot of the Swansea way, which people early on in the season thought, it's gone out the window, we're a long ball team now. You know, we're still having more possession than these teams, even if it's not as much as what Russell Martin brought us last year, but it's still there. You know, we still outpossessed Norwich, we still outpossessed Plymouth away. And there is a little bit more directness, and it's not all the same of just keep the ball safe and we'll work it long term. But I guess you could say it's more clinical, and maybe actually a lot of the stuff what fans were calling out for last season, you know, stop passing it for the sake of it and actually create an opportunity. And now it's the other way around, and yeah, you just can't win, can you?
Yeah. No, I do you know what? I mean, I'm never coming into these conversations from a place of sort of self-righteousness or anything, because like I appreciate that fans pay their hard-earned money to go every week, and I totally appreciate that, you know, you watch a lot more of Swansea than I can. At the same time, I suppose as someone who's kind of studied Michael Duff's career for the last 5 years, I just have so much faith, even through all the difficult periods, that he is a really good manager, and I've not really seen him. I've never really seen him as a long ball manager. I think he's a manager who likes his side to be able to mix up their passing and sometimes play longer, sometimes play shorter. And if there's a transitional opportunity, he likes his side to take it. And actually, I feel like there's an efficiency within that, Luke, that maybe Swansea didn't have last season under Russ Martin, where it was such a sort of purist sort of approach.
Yeah, well, we're a threat from things like set pieces now, which we weren't really under Russell Martin. And again, go back to why some of the fans struggled to get on board. Certain comments in press conference, I think it was the West Brom game where we scored from 2 set pieces to come back 3-2 in that game, and potentially could have had a third again. And there was a lot of comments from Duff saying how we had a lot of opportunities we were dangerous from set plays and stuff. And the fans were like, so that's just the way we're going to attack now, is here. That's not good enough, you know. But ultimately, it's not the way we're going to attack. It's a way we can attack and we can be dangerous from. If you look at the Plymouth game, the 3 goals we scored in that game were very high quality, but all different. So the first goal was Patterson crossed into the box, a header across the box and tapped in. The second goal was a bit of individual brilliance from Oli Cooper.
Could we just talk about that Cooper finish as well? Because it looked to me like it was almost a toe poke.
It was,
but it was like from 25 yards out or something along those lines.
He's got that moment of magic in him when he gets that space. He was able to. He got played in. It was a neat ball by Grimes to play him in, for him to be able to turn and look at the goal. You know, you take 1 or 2 touches and you still no one's closed you down, and you're going to have a pop, you know. And he's got quality, and I think he showed maybe Rob Page, you know, I am still here, include me in the Wales squad, because you haven't been called up for 2, I think, now in a row. And he hasn't had the best start of the season, but that could be a big moment for Oli Cooper. So I thought he would be someone I would excel under Duff. Especially now we're playing with a 4-2-3-1 kind of system. You know, there's place for him to show himself, and I think that shows what quality we haven't seen for a while, but he definitely still possesses. And then to my previous point, then the third goal we scored, I don't know if you've seen it from Josh Key. I know I love Josh Key as well here, but the ball that Jamie Patterson played, like, it was exquisite. But before that, it was a team goal on the break from their corner down the other end of the pitch, you know, won the ball back. Some quick decision-making, cross-field balls to runners. And the ball that Patterson played, I mean, you need to watch it, but it's got to be one of the goals of a season for us.
Yeah.
Just from the team aspect and the vision. And to whip it round with his weaker left foot as well. And there was a defender in the way. He had to whip the ball, like curl it around to get to get it to Josh Key. He wouldn't have made it otherwise. And yeah, very, very good. But that just shows the different strings to the bow of the system now. And I know it is still early days, and we've had a bad run, and now we've had a good run. I'm sure it will switch back around. But at least you can see there's a lot more there than potentially what was thought when we were in that negative zone.
For sure. Talk to me about Matt Grimes then, Luke, because I think he was quite a central figure to our discussion last time, and it felt like there was a bit of an adjustment for him going from that purist style that we've talked about with Ross Martin to sometimes playing it forward a little bit earlier under Michael Duff. Have there been signs in these last 4 wins that Grimes is starting to sort of get the hang of that slightly different remit?
Yeah, so I think I might have mentioned when I was on here last time that he's not getting the best out of Grimes, and ultimately that's not getting the best out of Swansea.
Of course, yeah.
And all of a sudden, Grimes seems to be, I don't know, something's like clicked or something's happened, because Grimes is all of a sudden playing very well again, out of nowhere it would seem. You know, he came out and actually, as the captain, I guess, as you would do, but credit where due, came out and took full responsibility and said it's not good enough for the Cardiff match. And ever since then, I feel like something's just clicked within him in this style. You know, he has, and the change of formation has helped, don't get me wrong, but you've seen a bit more of him playing those early direct balls, still trying to be neat and tidy and keep the ball and keep it moving round when it's needed. But like we mentioned, the Oli Cooper goal, I'm not sure he would play that ball into Oli Cooper last year for Oli Cooper to turn and then run into space, you know, because it wasn't necessarily, oh, if I give it to him now, he's definitely got an opportunity. Like, people will criticise the assist stats, saying, like, you can't give him an assist for that because he's going to run up the pitch a bit and then hit one in from distance, you know. But ultimately, he wouldn't have played that ball last year because he wouldn't have seen that opportunity or seen that space, and he would have thought, I'm going to rework it and move the ball around the other side of the pitch and carry on that way, which is what Russell Martin would have wanted him to do.
Well, just to build on that, Luke, is there a positional aspect to this where last season, I think if you're a 6 in a Russ Martin side, you've basically got to be so positionally disciplined because you've always got to be there for when the ball gets recycled back into midfield. Whereas it feels like there's an element of opportunism under Michael Duff where it's like, if the space opens up for you, you can go into the forward space a bit more and we'll back the team to make it work with the system around you. So do you think he's working with that sort of style as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say then as well, he did get on the score sheet against, I think it was Millwall that Grimes scored. And that shows he's also getting a lot further up the pitch than he might have in previous seasons. And he's happy to do that. I saw against Millwall, I went down to the game. Sorry, Plymouth, I went down to the game. When we were 1-0 down, he was the midfield runner furthest forward. There was a goal kick and he was making a run through the defensive line, you know. And he never got that far forward under Russell Martin. So there's a little bit more flexibility for him to move around the pitch. I think he's still operating as the main man in the middle to get us ticking, alongside maybe Patino. But also that understanding that you can also push forward, maybe rotate with Jamie Patterson if he's the guy ahead of you, and if the space is there for you to break into or to play a 1-2 or whatever, get into it, you know. Don't have to just sit back and be that last man in the middle to fall back on, but you can make those runs, get the shots away from distance, which, you know, he has got a good left peg on him when he wants to use it. So yeah, it's nice to see, to be honest, because I think he has played in an attacking midfield role in his younger days, and we've kind of converted him into more of a, if I say classic Swans terms, Leon Britton role. Yeah. And now maybe if we can get a balance between the two, you can see a bit of Matt Grimes that hasn't been seen for years, but also is equally as dangerous. And people already consider him one of the better midfielders in the league. If that's another...
Well, I think he's been that for a while, hasn't he?
But there's an area maybe that we haven't seen so much of that we can exploit. Maybe, you know, well... Maybe I don't want that being shown because he probably gets snapped up after all these years, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oli, what do you think's possible for Swansea this season?
I think it's an interesting one because it's difficult to sort of judge that level. Obviously, I know it's been a fantastic run the last few games. Obviously, pre-season, I wasn't really talking up Swansea's chances. They weren't a team who I thought would be challenging for that last playoff spot. But as you look at the league now, I do think that if they can... I think Leicester's going to be an interesting test. And I think that's the first game back, isn't it, after the international
Yeah.
break? They've been fantastic this season. And I think what that'll show us is actually what is that level? Is it that we're on a good run of form? Obviously, beating Norwich gives us a bit of an indication, but going up against who are currently the best team in the league always gives you quite a nice barometer. I think they're in the conversation, if you ask me today, about a team that could maybe finish 6th. I don't think realistically they'd be looking further than that. And I think the most realistic outcome is top half, but a little bit behind that sort of playoff runners.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Luke, I wanted to talk to you about the centre-back pairing of Harry Darling and Bashir Humphreys. How well have they sort of settled since that formation change?
Yeah, so they haven't been the pairing for the 4-game winning run. I'm going to say they did the last 2 games because, first of all, Wood picked up an injury. I want to say Sheffield Wednesday, and Cabango picked one up in Millwall. So they were there originally, and Darling and Bashir Humphreys have come in. Bashir Humphreys did have a game playing left back as well, in the absence of Pedersen, who's also been injured, but Timon's come in there now. But in the last 2 games, they've been very strong. So, I mean, you know, there's clean sheets in the 2 before. We didn't have them in the previous 2, but ultimately I think you could argue they were also the more dangerous opposition going forward, but they dealt with what they've asked to been dealing with quite well. I think they haven't really played together a long time. So for me, Harry Darling especially, because he was here last season, I can talk a bit more about him. He's looking a different player, and it's weird to say that because he was Russell Martin's man last summer when he brought him in. He spent a lot of money on him, and he had an average season. You know, he did good. He didn't necessarily do as good as what we expected based on the fanfare around him when he came in and the fee that we decided to pay. That meant we couldn't strengthen in other areas. I think that was the priority. You know, it was a fee chosen to be spent here when we didn't have wing backs. So you'd expect, okay, this guy's got to be the real deal. But we're seeing a bit more out of him now, and I think maybe this style suits him a bit better than Russell Martin's style, and that's weird to say because of him being a signing that was brought in for that system, you know, but Duff is definitely getting the best out of him. And Bashir Humphreys, obviously on loan from Chelsea, early days, but I think hints of Mark Ehe in terms of coming here, really making a name for himself, and the sky's the limit. I mean, he's already got a call up for the England squad just as he came here on loan. I wouldn't have thought
England
he's going to get another one.
Or 21?
No, he got called up to the senior team. I don't think he played, but he got brought up right at the start of the season, just as we were signing him. It wasn't like while he was here, you know. He just came just before he went away. I can't imagine that's going to happen again because generally in the Championship it doesn't. Yeah. But I think at the time they were umming and ahhing on whether to actually let him go on loan, and he was potentially going to be used as backup for Chelsea's first team. There must have been injuries and stuff. I think he got called in late. But the point is, if he's already in that reckoning, you know, we had big... We've got, I guess, big expectations, so we're going to see a lot out of him, and he's definitely fitting well so far, and quite exciting to see how he can continue to develop, and I'm sure it will hurt when he returns back to Chelsea at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very exciting talent. Luke, do you think there's going to be funds for Michael Duff to improve the squad if he needs to in January? And if so, where do you think you're going to need to strengthen?
Yeah, well, we generally didn't really tap into any of the money from Joe Perot when he sold. There was a couple of late signings on deadline day, but they were not nowhere near the fee that we brought in. And there has been reassurances that there is definitely money to spend in January. I think if we're going to maintain this system of 4-2-3-1, we really need to be looking at the wide front areas. We've got people there or players there now that can fit in and do a job, and they have been doing so. But ultimately, there's a couple of injuries. We've got Josh Ginnelly out for the season. That's quite damaging, really. Quite frustrating because he started looking like a little bit of a breath of fresh air, an exciting player to sort of watch develop here. And yeah, we're not going to be seeing him now until next year. So we've got Liam Cullen playing out wide at the moment. Jamal Lowe, obviously Jamal Lowe is more suited there. Liam Cullen is not really his position. He's doing a good job at the moment, but you're probably getting a few more games in, and maybe that gets found out a bit. And there's not really that many options then to rotate into the wide areas if there is another injury, or if somebody needs a break, or if there's a bit of fixture congestion.
Sure.
You got Ollie Cooper can go either side, but again, he's not an out-and-out winger. He's more of an advanced forward that can kind of play across the front
areas,
three. Yeah. And Patterson, who has been playing in the middle, could go there as well. But I think with his age, he's been put in the middle for a reason, maybe. And there's not really too much else. You've got Cameron Congreve, who is a youngster that could come through and show himself there, but he hasn't really broke through yet. He's one of them that comes off the bench now and again. Hasn't made an appearance this season in the league. He did last season quite a few times under Martin, but it's not the person. You can't guarantee that's somebody that can come on and make a difference. He's still developing and learning. So that's probably the area we're shortest in. Even if it's an out and out central attacking playmaker to compete, just that three behind the striker, I think, is where we need to really focus our attentions now.
Yeah, well, hopefully you can have the funds to strengthen in January, and between now and then keep up the form that you've been on, because it's been really impressive for the last month or so, Luke. So best luck for the rest of the season. Keep up the great work on SwansCast, and I'm sure we'll catch up later in the season.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Thanks for having me on again.
Cheers, Luke. Top man.
Thanks, Luke.
Delighted to introduce our next guest, which is Oli Hargreaves, with a big smile on his face, from the Butter Pie podcast. I'm not sure what sort of smile, whether it's because it's 3 defeats on the spin. Oli, how are you feeling as a North Ender right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last couple of pod appearances were obviously heavily optimistic for what I was. I know at the start of the season I was heavily pessimistic, so it's kind of caught
yeah,
back up
it's 2-2
to me
now, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm feeling all right. I mean, to be fair, I knew that a loss was going to come fairly soon, because it was some starts of the season where I don't think anyone expected it. And I mean, if leading into the international break, you had Preston North End as third, albeit we've lost 3 on the bounce, but you played some fantastic sides there in West Brom who were always there up and about it. You've got Leicester, who were easily, for me, going to romp the league, like Burnley did last season. You've got Ipswich, who were, in the form of their life under Kieran McKenna.
Yeah.
Sure. To be fair, attacking-wise, against the Ipswich game, you could kind of tell that we're actually all right in that department. But we've had a couple of injuries in the back line, obviously losing Andrew Hughes, which is a massive miss to Lowe's system. So yeah, I think the international break came at a good time. We needed a bit of a reset again after the 3 losses, and hopefully we can turn it back around when we come back after the international break, and fingers crossed for no more injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the injuries have been a significant factor then behind the recent form?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is how we bounce back from a loss. I know the 4-0 loss against West Brom, and then you're looking to bounce back, but you're coming up against a very good Leicester side, which, albeit I thought we were fantastic for. I mean, until they scored, to be fair, but you can probably say that about any team coming up against Leicester. You do very well until, Leicester score. But yeah, it is what it is. I think Andrew Hughes, as you say, is a massive loss, and, is integral to the system. We've got Greg Cunningham playing there at the moment, who's only on contract till January. So, we're probably just fitting round pegs into square holes, as I always say. But yeah, I mean, losing several players. I know Alan Brown played at the weekend as well. He weren't fully fit. He was ill. He got dragged off after 45 minutes because we totally lost control in the midfield. So, it comes and it goes. It is a big part. Alan McCann's had to withdraw from international duty, so it does tot up in the end up, and we can't really handle many more injuries, Gab. Otherwise, we'll be struggling.
Yeah, for sure. I guess Ryan Lowe's had to change formation to a sort of Christmas tree system we saw at Portman Road. It's obviously probably not the formation that Ryan Lowe we've associated with Ryan Lowe previously, and he's so often liked a wing-back system. And clearly he wanted to keep the sort of dynamic of having two number 10s in Will Keane and Frokja Jensen, as well as having a back four. So I suppose that was what he felt would be the way to do it. But do you think that that's just a temporary measure until maybe Andrew Hughes comes back and you can maybe go back to a more of a wing-back system?
Yeah, and I also feel like because he left Ben Whiteman out of the squad, not out of the squad, out of the starting 11 again against Ipswich, and to leave Ben Whiteman out of the starting 11, and to be fair, in many teams in the league's a big shout. To be fair, so to be fair, he's brought in Ryan Ledson, who, albeit has been all right this season, and he's a bit more obviously defensively minded. So I think what I have mentioned before is Ryan Lowe, obviously with Plymouth, he's played this attacking football, and we've played this attacking football for the start of the season as well. Mm-hmm. But recently, due to injuries, he's kind of had to go a bit more conservative. And then, you're playing players like Ledson over Whiteman to try and conserve and protect the defence a bit more. So it all starts, it's like a big Jenga piece where, you pull one keg of the team out, all falls down. So I think Lowe's trying to play conservatively, and then obviously when he gets the players back that he trusts and knows will perform in the system that he's been playing, I think that'll be a lot better. But only one thing that I would mention about is, you've got Will Keane and you've got Osmajic, and for the past 3 games, Osmajic has just been totally left alone up top. He's getting no support whatsoever, and he's getting dragged off after 60 minutes because...
Which is odd when you think about it, just to jump in there, because you've got Keane just behind him theoretically, and you've got Frokja Jensen. So it's not as if you've played a 4-5-1 where you've got, 5 central midfielders. Like, there has been the intent in terms of starting lineup to give that support to him.
Yeah, to be fair, I think the only time that Mads has been left out of the squad for about 4 or 5 games. And then obviously Keane's just come back from injury, so it's the first time that they're really playing together. And
sorry, Mads Frokja Jensen has been left out of the squad for 4 or 5 games.
No, not squad, starting 11.
Starting 11.
He's not been getting a sniff. And then Lowe came out with like this strange comment because against Leicester, when we were 1-0 down, he got left on the bench, and we brought on some youngsters like Noah Mwenni, and then you bring on Ben Woodburn, and he came out with comments in the press saying that, Mads Frokja Jensen's for more of a possession-based game. And you're just thinking...
I can kind of see that in a way. If you need like a strong runner against the ball, I'm not sure he's that. Whereas Mads Frokja Jensen has that kind of balletic side where he's very elusive, but I'm not sure I necessarily fancy him in a counter-attacking system or a Gegenpressing type.
Yeah.
That's just my outside perspective.
But comparing that against someone like Ben Woodburn, I mean, Ben Woodburn, he does well, but he's not for me as a Preston North End player. I'm going to put that out there. He does well, but he's not for me. And I do think he gets a bit of harsh critics. But
yeah, I'm not sure. It's weird with Ben Woodburn actually, because it feels like he's. I think he became Liverpool's youngest ever goal scorer against Leeds in the League Cup back in 2016. And since then, he's had so many moves where you'd think it's going to work for him, and it felt like it never quite has. So I feel like he needs to rebuild his career at a lower level, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think him coming on instead of like Mads Frokja Jensen, I'm not sure it's his statement as such, but I probably wouldn't have done it because for me, Ben Woodburn, unlike Mads, who can just make something out of nothing, Mads could probably, it could be quite all game. And then as you see with I think it was against Swansea, he's not made the player, put it straight across the box and we score from it.
Yeah.
I don't think Ben Woodburn has that spark currently. I'm not sure if it's a confidence thing because, as you mentioned with, scoring for Liverpool, Liverpool's youngest ever scorer, and then going to Wales national duty, scoring an absolute beauty on his debut or something. So he's had many highs in the expectations, as you mentioned. I do think he needs to rebuild his career probably at a lower level, potentially League One, get some more game time. But yeah, I mean, Lowe's got it spot on with substitutions when we're winning. But obviously he's going to get very scrutinised when we're losing, especially if we're on the bounce, with the subs that he's making. And then obviously against Leicester, you're coming up against the best team and you're bringing on, youngsters who haven't even played any minutes this championship over someone like Mads Jensen. He's coming against Ipswich, scored, done fairly well, but he's still not fit because obviously he's not played a full 90. So he's kind of that player that you need playing every game. And for me, he deserves to be because he's a fantastic player. And I know at the start of this EFL debate season, I was going all low socks. He's the next Grealish, and then he gets dropped for 5 games, so it made me feel a bit silly. But
Do you think though? I do want to bring in Colin Southwell from Pinken of Norwich City in a few moments, but I do want to kind of continue whether the Ben Whiteman conversation fits into the one about Mads Jensen, because I feel like in order to get the best out of Jensen, you've got to have a steady volume of possession in the middle third, and you need someone like Whiteman who can progress the ball into those more advanced areas, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and I feel like with Mads, he needs someone who's probably on the same page as him. So, someone who's able to give the ball into feet. And then even as you mentioned with Osmajic, because Osmajic, he's not been receiving the ball much recently, so sometimes he's been dropping deep. And I know, obviously, Emil Rees has been out for 8 months now. He's coming back after the international break, as well as Ched Evans. Well, yeah, Rees running in behind, which is his main point. And, you see Mads sometimes trying to play those balls in behind for Osmajic, and he's dropped deep. But then again, Ched Evans, he's there's been rumours of, obviously, his second scan going well, and apparently he's back full training after the international break. Well, within the international break, he's fully back then. I'm actually surprised. I didn't believe Ched will probably play again for North End, especially with a massive injury like a spinal injury. If he was to get smashed again, it's huge repercussions for him. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Mads does, especially with players like Rees and with Whiteman, who's able to get the ball to him, quick and efficiently, where he's able to beat players one-on-one, and then potentially have Liam Miller on the other side who can, beat players one-on-one, and then fingers crossed
he's very exciting, isn't he, Liam Miller? Hopefully, listen, you've got some exciting players. Hopefully, you can kind of just get some of them on the pitch for different reasons, and just get that amalgamation of them. But I mean, you've played some good teams. I think that's the most important thing to
come up against some quality teams, and the run can only go on for so long, Gab. It's not another invincible season just yet. So
we've already lost, so we know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the reason to know it's not going to be an invincible season. I was wondering, but no. Listen, Oli, it's been great to have you on. Big fan of your stuff with the Butter Pie podcast. So thanks for joining us, and speak to you again soon.
Speak to you again soon, guys. Cheers for having me on.
Cheers, mate. Delighted to bring in our next guest, which is Connor Southwell, the Norwich City journalist from Pinken and one of the Yellow Army as well. Great to have you on, Connor. How are you, mate?
Evening, gents. Yeah, I'm not too bad. How are you both?
Yeah, we're really well. Just want to talk about Norwich's season so far, because I think in the first month of the campaign, there was a huge amount of excitement about what Gabriel Sara was going to bring to the party. And Johnny Rose started on sort of absolutely electric, and it looked like some of the experienced players he brought in over the free market were settling in quickly. I guess over the last 5 or 6 weeks, there's been a few concerns, and maybe a few sides have started to find a blueprint for how to beat Norwich City, and obviously that 6-2 loss at Plymouth Argyle was maybe a little bit of a warning sign. So, all things considered, how are you feeling as a Norwich fan right now?
Yeah, not great. I think that's the general mood around the fan base at the moment. I think you're right. They did start so well, and I think what we have to take into account and what you have to mitigate everything that Norwich City are doing with is the fact that they lost Josh Sargent to injury, they lost Ashley Barnes to injury. They were 2 real key players to David Wagner's system and the way that he wanted to go and press teams and attack teams, and he's lost both of those. But by the same token, that's not the reason why they've got the fourth worst expected goals against. It's not the reason why they're averaging 15 shots against them per game at the moment. There are lots of kind of trade-offs I think you can have between positive and negative, and the attacking stats still look pretty good by all accounts. But the trends at the moment are concerning, I would say, really concerning, and the performances have dipped basically over the last 5 to 6 games to really bad levels. They got absolutely battered on Saturday by all accounts. They should have lost that game. They should have been beaten. They weren't on top when they scored, and they weren't on top after they scored. And in the end, it was obviously an own goal, and I felt for Ben Gibson a bit with it, but. Not in a good place, Gab, to be honest, and a real contrast to if we'd have had this conversation as we did a month or so ago. So I think there's a fair amount of concern. I'm really concerned about Norwich City and the way they're heading at the moment.
Oli, coming to you on this, how important is it that while Norwich City are in a reasonable position in terms of the league table, just 1 point off the playoff spots, that they do try and eradicate some of the problems they've had lately?
Yeah, you always want to be trying to look at it from a position of strength when you're trying to change some of these issues, when you're trying to really start to make these changes, because you don't get the time to make them when you're no longer in a position of strength. And I think that's the worry for me. Obviously, injuries do play a huge part, and hopefully when those players start to come back in, as and when that is, that will make a difference and you'll see sort of positive changes. But I think if you need to find solutions, they need to be found before it gets any worse. It's a really difficult looking sort of run of fixtures as well immediately after the international break. I think it's Leeds, Middlesbrough, Sunderland, which, all of a sudden you can very quickly see if 3 more games tick on, points aren't there, that promising start becomes quite a worrying middle. And so, I think they want to be using this time that they've got. I know all the players won't be there, but any time you've got on the training pitch over the next couple of weeks is just finding those solutions, trying to rest some of that slide, particularly things like defensive organisation, and finding a way to stop chances being created against you is so key in the Championship, because it's a lot harder to keep the ball out of your net than put it in the other teams, I always think.
Connor, I want to sort of take it to the big picture, because I feel like that's really where attentions have to be with Norwich right now, because I don't think they've got a team that's capable of winning promotion and certainly not sort of competing in the Premier League. So I do think you have to look at the big picture a little bit. There's been some good news that the Atanasios are increasing their stake in the football club, which I see from the outside as a really positive thing, considering how long we've been having that conversation about fresh investment. And secondly, you've brought in a sporting director in Ben Napper, who officially takes charge in November. And I'm just wondering how big a difference you're hoping Napper can make in terms of maybe having a bit more of an alignment between the playing style and the recruitment, because that's something that's probably up for questioning based on last summer, or the summer just gone, I should say.
Yeah, I think at the moment it feels a bit like a football club in limbo. I think Norwich have always externally sort of portrayed the view of being quite stable all of the time, and quite well, the perception I'm sure that other fans have of being well run, and they are well run by and large. Maybe not the last couple of years, but they over Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones's tenure, they've been incredibly well run, and they have adopted a very unique model, which is self-funding, which you don't really see in football. That obviously has its ceiling and its limitations, and there's an argument to say that they've punched above their weight for a long period of time. So you're right, that external investment was crucial in that regard. It was also necessary because of the steps the club took to trying to raise some of the debt that it had accrued from spending quite big in a Premier League window that went quite wrong. So there was a necessity about the Atanasio and investment and his group coming in, and agreed. The second point is the new sporting director, and that's where I think a lot of Norwich fans are beginning to turn the target onto David Wagner pretty quickly, and I'm sure we'll get onto him in a moment. But sporting directors, typically, we know how they operate. They think long term. They go in and want to be disruptors. They want to change things. They want to leave their own stamp on things, and at the moment, David Wagner is kind of the continuity for Norwich City, which is a really interesting kind of place that he's manoeuvred himself into. That being said, I think what works against him, and you mentioned it there, is the recruitment and the road they went down this summer, where they hadn't signed a single 30-year-old in outfield player in Stuart Webber's tenure. So since 2017, they signed 5 this summer with another 2 who will be 30 by the end of the year. So when you do that, when you adopt that policy, there does become a short-termism to what you do. Fans do want to see you win and win quickly, because suddenly, you've got a group of players there, and it's talk about mentality and experience and all of that stuff. You start losing games, and actually it just looks quite old and it looks quite rudderless. And suddenly you've got players who aren't going to be there in the next 2-year, 3-year cycle. So that really is it from Ben Napper's perspective. He has to come in and implement, I guess, what he wants to do is he obviously needs to think about the long term, but what does that look like? What's his idea of football? What's the type of culture he wants to set? What's the direction that he wants to take Norwich City? So I think there's a little bit of deja vu about where Norwich City are, if I'm honest. It feels a little bit like where they were when Stuart Webber inherited on the pitch, vastly improved off the pitch with the infrastructure and the work that they've done at Colney. But he's got a big job on his hands, and I'm sure he's acutely aware of the challenges that he faces. But right now it feels like the immediate focus is on David Wagner and his position. And I'm sure, as you guys have mapped out, if the run of games after the break goes as I expect, and probably a lot of Norwich fans expect, I would only expect that to intensify over the next few weeks.
I would put forward that an element of sympathy for Wagner, because the reason that Norwich brought in those 5 30-plus-year-olds that you mentioned earlier was because they didn't have the capital to do what they did in 2020, where they rejuvenated the squad with lots of young, high-potential talents who brought lots of fresh energy and rejuvenated things. Different financial circumstances this time around, so you kind of either looking at loans, and I think the club has used the loan markets, but if you want younger, hungrier players that are up to something, you've got to pay money for them, and maybe the club didn't have that kind of money from the outside. So I suppose, is there an element there for David Wagner where he just hasn't quite had the capital to actually do what he wants to do with this squad?
Yeah, he's definitely not had the best hand. He's not been dealt the best hand in terms of, obviously he was appointed in January. Stuart Webber resigned in March. That's not particularly helpful from his perspective, and I think you read between the lines, and we're still not sure 100%, but the general sort of feeling you get is that he wasn't aware that decision was going to come from Stuart Webber. So he took the job on pretenses of working under somebody who then has decided a couple of months later that they don't want to continue that journey. And then obviously you have the overhang of what happened at the back end of last season, which is 1 win in 11, and he lost a lot of credit during that run. I think that's fair to say. Sure. It's interesting because Dean Smith had a similar run towards the end of the Premier League season, but I think was probably viewed in a completely different way to what Wagner was at the end of last season. And I also think, in a bizarre way, that the start that they had has gone against them, because they were so good. They pushed expectations so high when there was no expectation in the summer. And so now this dip has been met with probably more concern off the back of that. So I feel really sorry for him. He's obviously had bad injuries as well, but you could easily counter that with, well, good coaches find a way to adapt, and he hasn't really tweaked his system. He's asking Adam Eder to do exactly what he wanted Josh Sargent to do. They're very different type of players, so I think there's a point about adaptation there. But yeah, I think there's just a feeling, rightly, wrongly, justly or unjustly, of Norwich fans looking at obviously the new sporting director coming, looking at all the change that is on the horizon, and just feeling that he's not going to be here for very long. And it's up to him, obviously, to prove that's not the case. He's on a 1-year rolling deal, so there's not a huge amount of security in that regard either. So I just feel, and we've kind of seen it already, we saw it at the weekend, I think this is a conversation now that is happening about David Wagner's future inside the Norwich City space. So I feel like as soon as you get to that point, it doesn't take much or long for it to tip and to turn overwhelmingly in the other direction. We're not there yet. I think there's still a pretty decent split between those who would get rid of him now and those who maybe would like him to continue. But yeah, we're definitely on a path, I think, where you could see that scenario playing out. It's obviously up to him to change the course, but at the moment, it feels like Norwich City, in terms of on the pitch or on a slide, that he is really struggling to arrest. And like you say, part of that is that the squad depth isn't there, and I think most Norwich fans feel that this isn't a particularly great squad. So yeah, and I get your point about the league table. The point I would make about the league table is I'm not sure how much credibility there is in that at this stage, because as you mentioned, they're 2 points off Preston in third. I think they're also like 2 points off 16th. So these things can go so quickly.
Sure.
And for example, they were either in the playoffs or just outside the playoffs when Dean Smith was sacked on Boxing Day, and most Norwich fans could see the direction of travel. And I think that's kind of where we are. People are looking at it and are seeing a similar direction of travel, and that's the issue that he has at this moment in time. But yeah, you're completely right, and I really sympathise with him because he's been dealt a really tricky hand in these 10 months or so that he's been in charge.
For sure. I want to ask you about Adam Eder as well, Connor, because I think there's been a level of pressure placed on his shoulders this season that maybe he wasn't expecting, even with Teemu Pukki gone, because Ashley Barnes was brought in and you had Joshua Sargent as well before both got injured. And I wonder with Adam Eder whether he's almost a victim of the potential that he showed initially, because maybe it would have been a better sort of progression plan for him to actually have started out getting a loan in League Two, League One, building up a bit of confidence, being a big fish in a small pond initially, and then having the confidence to come into the Norwich City squad. Actually, I'm not even sure if he's had a loan move. He might have had one, but no loan moves yet. So you do wonder whether Norwich have necessarily played it the right way for his development. And now you're looking at a player that's coming up to sort of early to mid 20s now, and not really an awful lot better than he was in 2019.
It's a really nuanced debate. There's lots of strands to it. But you're right. The fact is he's 22, I think now, and he hasn't. I don't think off the top of my head there might have been a significant. I get lost in the Championship. You play like 6 games in a week, and you don't. But it feels like that. And so the stats are. But last time I checked, he hadn't even made 20 league starts in the Championship for Norwich City. So that's not great. He's at a really low level of football. He's not played much senior football, and obviously a major reason for that is because Norwich City had Teemu Pukki for 5 years, who was scoring goals at will, and that obviously then had a knock on to what they could do from a recruitment perspective, because to attract a striker to come to the club knowing they weren't going to get in the team was very, very difficult, as you've seen with some of the options that they did attract.
Sure.
They had Jordan Hugill for a little while who played that role. Jordan Rhodes, if you go even further back,
to be fair, both of them did actually really well in the title winning seasons. I thought
they did, and Rhodes was slightly different in that first case because Norwich signed him to be their first choice because nobody expected Pukki to have that impact. So subsequently, it's been really difficult to recruit a striker, and that has meant that they need to keep Eder in and around the place just for numbers, really, and that means he's kind of got caught in a halfway house where he's too good to play for the 21s or the 23s, but Norwich need him, so they weren't able to loan him out, and that really is it feels harsh, but it is a failure of his development, really, because as you say, he should have gone to a League One club, to a League Two club earlier on in his career, and he should have had that exposure and that experience and that regular game time, and he hasn't had that, and as such he's struggled for rhythm, and he's one of these players. I spoke to him after Norwich beat Huddersfield 4-0 because that was a really interesting example, because he really struggled to get into that game, and then there was one moment where he burst down the right, put a ball into the box, and John Rose stabbed it in, and from there he looked transformed. He looked a completely different footballer, and he went on to score a really good goal. And I spoke to him afterwards, and it was like I put the question. I was like, it felt like you need something to happen in a game to like spark something. And he kind of admitted that it's a confidence thing with him, and I know they've done a lot of work with his mentality and improving that, and so that's one strand. I also think there's an element of it where he's quite harshly treated by the Norwich fan base, in that you look at him, and he scored 4 goals I think this season. Ashley Barnes has obviously been out injured for a period of time, but Ashley Barnes was starting every game, and at one point when they were level on par, I think it was 4 or 5 games in, Barnes had scored 2 and Eder had scored 2, and yet the perception of them was so different. Ashley Barnes was...
Do you think it's a similar situation to Todd Cantwell a few years ago?
Yeah, possibly.
The homegrown player. Sometimes
Yeah.
homegrown players have this weird thing where it's almost like fans expect more of them, and they end up getting more stick when you'd think they'd be the ones that fans would be absolutely all behind. But sometimes it can work the other way.
Yeah, I think there is an element of that, and he's not new and shiny anymore, and there's an element of that as well. It feels like he's been around for a lot longer than he has, and I keep hearing Norwich fans go, "Oh, how many chances is he going to get?" But as I just said to you, he's not really had many chances, to be completely honest with you, beyond a few minutes off the bench. I don't know how many full games he's played, 90 minutes throughout his career at Norwich. I would imagine it would be in single figures, or if not just into double figures. It's not a lot. I think his longest run in the team at championship level was 9 games, and a lot of those games came as a winger last season between Smith and Wagner taking over. So he's had a very difficult time. And another thing to throw in was the club gave him a 5-year contract, which completely baffled a lot of Norwich fans because of his development and not really backing that up with what they've seen on the pitch. And so he's taken a lot of flack for that, which I think is really harsh because he's not given himself a 5-year contract. He's kind of being bashed around the head with something that really it should be the people who offered him a 5-year contract that get criticism for that if you feel there's criticism warranted.
Sure.
And then there's the final strand of there's been a few opportunities this season that he's squandered. There was one at Swansea, which I think personally was a lot harder than maybe people are viewing it as, where Poeta flashed it across the box and he just felt to me like he was trying so hard to get in the position that he didn't really think about what he needed to do once he got in the position. And then there was another one on Saturday where McCallum whipped the ball across the face of goal, and there's some replays that make it look like he should have thrown himself at it, but I think it was gone, to be honest. So I think there is a little bit of nitpicking, but I think personally in this run of games that he's played over the last 3 or 4 games, he's played well. It's just probably a lack of cutting edge in front of goal, and that probably feeds to the point of confidence. So I know that's a really long-winded answer, but he's a really nuanced player and a really interesting
I can see that.
And I really want him to do well, so hopefully he can prove it. But sadly the goals aren't coming at the moment. But in his fairness, in his sort of defense, beyond John Rowe and Gabby Sarah, there's not a great deal behind him at this moment in time.
Yeah, it feels like a theme for Norwich City generally, doesn't it? Well, listen, Connor, it's been great to get your insight on it. Thanks so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. Love your stuff on Pinken. So, good to catch up. I'm sure we'll speak to you again later in the season. Thanks, as always, to my co-host, Oli, for joining us from Sheffield United Way. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast, and we'll see you again very soon.